You are listening to the Voice of Vashon on 101.9 FM KVSH LP, Vashon Island, Washington. And we welcome to the studio Shango Los.
Hey there, glad to be here.
Good to have you. You are the founder of the Vashon Island Marijuana Entrepreneurs Alliance. Or entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial?
Entrepreneurs Alliance.
Entrepreneurs
right?
Alliance.
Yeah.
And I thought we'd just start by having you take a moment to tell us exactly what the Alliance is trying to do.
Sure. Well, the Alliance has evolved over time. When I first started the Alliance about 3 years ago, the goal was mostly to increase the awareness of people on the island that cannabis is our number one cash crop, that it does have medicinal uses, and to create a platform for people to discuss the good that growers do on the island instead of just the taboo expectations that we've had along the lines. With the legalization of marijuana in our state, there were a lot of folks who wanted to start cannabis businesses on the island, but they were concerned of ridicule. And so I decided, since I am not a grower myself, it would be good to to step up and point to the group and say, these people are good, where it's a lot more difficult to say, as a grower, we are good. So it's a lot easier when a third party says that. And I think that the growers add a lot to our community, and so that was the beginning of it. As more people got interested in starting their own I-502 recreational businesses, I started holding meetings where I would explain the regulations and go through it for folks so they could really decide if they wanted to take this step. It's quite expensive, and it's very bureaucratic, and it's not for everybody.
You described it as Byzantine, the regulation maze.
It is terrible, and you've got multiple levels of laws. You've got the laws at the state level, and then you've also got the laws at the county level. And since we're unincorporated King County, it makes it even a little more complex.
On Vashon Island, you might have laws on the south end that are not the same as the north end.
Absolutely, and we run into that all the time. And now that the 502 companies are set up and the window for licensing is closed, we've morphed again into doing business support for those companies, marketing support generally for cannabis from the island, and most important to me now, patient education for the healing benefits of cannabis, because the more people I meet, I just keep on meeting more people who are not aware of the power, the healing power of cannabis, because everybody's just been taught it's something that you use to get stoned, and that's just not the case.
I've heard of people who have actually had to move from one state to another, especially, I think there was a recent case of a man in Florida who had pretty severe PTSD, but he was getting really great results using marijuana. But the local officials cracked down on him, and he has decided to move to Colorado.
There's a lot of folks moving to Colorado because their laws are less Byzantine than ours. There's a great deal of CBD type medicine, which is the kind that's more focused on soothing your nerve systems versus and neuromuscular, versus THC, which tends to be the part that gets you high, right?
Oh yeah, I've heard of arthritis people benefiting from the cannabinoids.
There's a whole range, and it's interesting. The different ailments call for different mixtures. For example, if you want to cure cancer, not just deal with the symptoms, but if you want to cure your cancer, you want a high level of CBD, but you also want a significant amount of THC as well. So you need them both working together. It's what we call the entourage effect, or whole plant medicine. Whereas there are some children on the island who are epileptic and they have seizures, and they don't need any of the THC at all. They need really clean CBD so that they don't get lethargic at school, but so the seizures decrease. And so we try to get that into their hands. To their parents' hands.
You made a statement a few minutes ago about curing cancer. We should hear more about that. Have they done some clinical trials?
Absolutely. The big problem is that here in the United States, it's a Schedule I drug, which means that there's zero medical benefit, which is ridiculous because the U.S. government holds the patent on cannabis to cure disease. And so that's one of the reasons we've been trying to get it rescheduled for all these years. But up until now, people have only been talking about cannabis being used to treat your symptoms after chemo. But recently, there have been more and more folks, and this is mostly anecdotal evidence. They study it in the UK, but here they don't. And what we're finding is that there is a course of cannabis that you can take over 90 days involving 60 grams of RSO, what we call Rick Simpson oil. And if you take that as directed, I guess I'll say, it will slow down the metabolic rate of the cancer cells and then reverse it. And for the longest time, I only heard about this secondhand. And then just recently, in the past 6 months, my good friend was diagnosed with lymphoma, and it was aggressively increasing. And he decided that before he went through the hells of chemo, that he wanted to try a course of Rick Simpson oil. And so he did that. And to take that much cannabis, excuse me, to take that much cannabis, it causes you to sleep a lot during the day. And so, he wasn't able to really do much of anything for half of those 3 months.
Well, same could probably be said of intense chemotherapy.
Absolutely. And in the end, excuse me,
I
sorry.
want to make you a cup of tea. I actually do that a lot in here, too.
In the end, he went back for his tests after his 90 days with cannabis, and his oncologist thought the test had to be wrong. And because the 4 lymphoma locations that there were, 2 of them had disappeared, and the other 2 of them had stopped growing and were in decline, and his numbers had all gone down. And his oncologist, who's a very Western doctor, was very staunch against it when he first heard about it. But then he said the numbers don't lie, and now they're at the hospital that he was attending, they're going to do a paper on him. And because they considered it an outlier. But for those of us into herbal medicine, we understand that humans have had a relationship with cannabis longer than we've had written language. And
wow, really?
And cannabis, see, our own systems, we've got what's called an endocannabinoid system. And so that means endo, meaning occurring within us, and cannabinoid is the cannabinoids. So we already produce a wide range of cannabinoids in us. And there is only one other plant that we found in the entire world that also holds those cannabinoids, and that is cannabis sativa. So we early on in human history, we embraced it and started to cultivate it, and then so we've become partners in evolution. And so we as humans are choosing the ones that have been best for us, and we have been taking care of the cannabis. And that all just came to an abrupt stop just 100 years ago when it became competition for liquor. It became competition for the fiber industry, and folks wanted
hemp, yes.
Absolutely, in hemp, and then and they wanted to slur the Mexican immigrants, and so they changed the name to marijuana, and said that it was a bad thing. It was being brought over the border, and it was all just a bunch of slur to get rid of this plant that can renew our relationship with fiber and fossil fuels, and also heal so many different ailments.
So that people would buy more whiskey in order to solve their problems.
Absolutely.
Which, of course, as they know, never solves anything.
So you're trying to build a bridge between the recreational and the medical growers. What is involved here on the island? We obviously have had the image of the stoner who grows on his land and shows up with a paper bag with bud in it, and that people buy and pass around amongst their friends. And this has been going on for a very long time on the black market. But then when medical came along, it became legitimate, and now there is this kind of is there a competition between these two elements, or is there do you see a way to bridge that gap?
Because those are also the people who know the most about growing marijuana.
Well, I have to answer that question in 2 different levels. Mm-hmm. Here on the island, there is no competition because they are very different markets. We have got 4 up and running 502 producers on the island right now. They cannot sell anything on the island because we don't have a 502 store, and so they send all their cannabis over into Seattle. They are successful, doing well. Then also
for the recreational market.
For the recreational market,
okay.
Correct. As a matter of fact, Vashon Velvet, who was the first 502 on the island, they are doing so well and producing such a beautiful organic product that their future harvests are already pre-sold to people, because not only do they do a good job, but flower from Vashon has got an aspirational quality because we're an island, and people like the idea that their cannabis is being grown out of the city on an island because they imagine, the beaches and the nature that we've got there.
Vashon Wowie.
It's so Vashon Velvet is a great example. So that's the 502 folks. But then also we have medical. And so the medical folks can sell both here on the island through our local dispensary, Island Cure in town. But most of the medical producers on the island send their product over to dispensaries in Seattle. And unfortunately, since House Bill 5052 passed just several weeks ago, the tide has turned. We've had legal medical in our state for 18 years, and it's about to be banned. I mean, it is banned.
What?
It's rolled in now. The goal by the legislature was to roll medical into recreational so that you got them both at the same store, because the medical dispensaries have been undercutting the prices in the recreational market, which I understand that's not good for the 502 market. But that said, in the end, I'm more interested in the patient's health than the economic veracity of the 502 stores. Eventually, I can see that the 502 stores would be able to carry medical products, but that hasn't happened yet. And the first sundown of the marijuana law happens July 25th. It will radically decrease plant counts. It's going to close a bunch of dispensaries in Seattle. And for example, on our island, the two things that, well, there's three things that our patients need most. One, the Rick Simpson oil I was talking about earlier. Second, tinctures. And third, flour. And the only thing that the I-502 stores carry right now is the flour. They don't carry tinctures, and high CBD tinctures, and they don't carry Rick Simpson oil at all yet. And so in the interim, until the recreational market can get caught up, I don't know where patients are going to get their medicine. And there's a lot of scared folks on the island because they've weaned themselves off of pharmaceuticals and onto this herbal, safe, no one's ever died from it, and your side effects are possibly getting the munchies and or sleeping and watching cartoons, right? And most folks, though, it gives them an opportunity to relieve their aches and pains, slow down their Alzheimer's, and maybe release their back enough that they can go out and walk around Fisher Pond. I mean, this is people.
Not to mention nausea relief.
I mean, there's a whole list of things that cannabis can be used for. And in the interim, until the recreational market can catch up with what the medical market's already done, there's going to be a lot of people at a loss. But then to circle back to your question, the competition, there really isn't a competition on the island between 502 and medical. And unfortunately, what's probably going to happen with 5052 is the majority of the medical people will go back to the underground.
So do we get to vote on that? Or is that all the legislature, which is half controlled by, people on the other side of the mountains?
Well, no, actually, the folks the other side of the mountains are very in favor of it. I mean, it's going to be their new huge cash crop. They've got better sunshine than we do.
True.
And so most of them have been voting for it. The challenge is that when the time came for people to speak up and call our legislators, most folks just didn't do it.
I don't think I ever knew that it was happening.
And see, that's the problem with big money versus artisan growers. Medical growers tend to be artisan growers. Certainly the ones on Vashon are. And the 502 market is primarily big money growers. They've got, 8 times the lobbyists that medical folks had.
They're in it for the money mostly.
Sure. And, I can't, certainly medical people like the money too. I mean, it's a small business for a lot of home growers. And you know what? That's okay. That's okay that they make money off of medical by producing medicine. That said, it is not hard to spread disinformation to the public in general and to the legislature when you've got that kind of money. And I've got friends that are in 502. I consult for 502 companies, so I'm not anti-502 at all. All I'm saying is that the way that the Washington State Liquor Control Board is handling the transition is deleterious to patients. And for as much as I care, patients are the number one priority. The capitalist side of it is secondary, but, okay also.
How did the Liquor Control Board come into being a player here? Shouldn't have this been, since it's a completely different substance, shouldn't have this had its own new board established?
Certainly. The folks with the Liquor Control Board had no experience with cannabis. They hired an outside consulting firm that did not have the proper skill set. And what's funny is they gave them cannabis right after they took liquor away from them, right? Because we just privatized liquor because the LCB wasn't handling it correctly. And they're like, oh, let's give them something more difficult to regulate now. The big difference between what we did here in Washington and what they did in Colorado is that in Colorado they took their pre-existing medical market, they blessed it, and they taxed it. And then it grew into recreational. Here in Washington, they took the medical market, they dismantled it, and try to make something all new with new players with little experience and replace it. And it's just been a debacle.
Our guest is Shango Los, the founder of the Vashon Island Marijuana Entrepreneurs Alliance. This is fascinating. Can you hang out for another segment?
Yeah, I'd love to stay.
Okay, cool. I'm going to play a song that, there's no conversation around marijuana that can't include a little Brewer and Shipley on the Voice. Brewer and Shipley, One Toke Over the Line on Voice of Vashon, 1020 on the Morning Scramble with Jeff and Cindy Hoyt and Shango Los from Vashon Island Marijuana Entrepreneurs Alliance. Shango, I'm curious about this. I read an interview with you where you were talking about the small organic family farm and how growing marijuana is a way for these small farms, which already struggle to make their nut, have a way to actually grow more organic vegetables, fruits and vegetables, because of the support that comes from having a marijuana cash crop that they can also grow. Talk to us about that a little bit.
That's one of my biggest passions. I moved to Vashon for the organic farms. Before I moved here, I was coming over to volunteer and to just be close to food, be close to organic farmers. And then when I eventually moved here, I got to have farmers as friends, and I realized how hard it is to pay your mortgage and put the kids through school on a farmer's income. And so when cannabis became legal, I realized that we could follow a model where if the food farmers incorporated cannabis onto their properties, cannabis has got such much better margins that it would be quite elegant to have the cannabis pay for the note on the farm and let the organic food just be food. Take some of the weight off of the food so that it can be the farmer's passion and feed our island, because we certainly don't want to get rid of the food farms. But it would be really great if the food didn't have to carry all the weight. When I learned that so many foods are picked prematurely so that they don't get damaged, the shipping to market, before their full nutrition has set in, that really upset me. And the idea that you could produce food or do it in a less efficient way so that the food itself was more nutritious but had less margin, and in exchange grow cannabis, which could pick up the weight plus some, I was really into that. There's actually a farmer down in Vancouver, Washington, called farmer Tom Lauerman. And he is the perfect example for this. He's been a long-time organic food farmer. He got into medical marijuana, and now he's got an I-502 license. And he not only has a CSA for his organic food, but he also has a CSA for cannabis as well. And it's legal. And he this is the kind of model that I hope for folks on Vashon. Now, at the moment, it's very challenging to do that because the laws are such a mess. And most of the farmers on the island, I tell them, this isn't really a good time to do this. Long term, yes, but farmers work on such thin margins already, coming up with the huge initial down. And every time the state changes their laws right now, it costs business people money. And they might have the savings for it, but the farmers may not. And so what I hope is that as the regulation structure gets easier to manage, and when the door for licenses opens again with the state, that we can start educating and assisting more farmers on the island to do that. Because in the end, we want to preserve organic food on the island, and we also want there to be enough wealth on the island so that we can lift some of the folks up out of poverty. And we've got a lot of those folks here.
Is a lot of marijuana right now grown with pesticides, with inorganic processes, or do you think most of it is already organic? It just needs transplanting.
Most of it on the island is organic. I mean, people who live here tend to be organic anyway, right? Organic, permaculture, that kind of stuff. And so our 502 growers are organic. As a matter of fact, Vashon Velvet goes even farther. They are low water usage because they set up a efficient hydroponic system, and they even use very unique LED lights so they decrease their carbon footprint for electricity. So, they're a perfect example of it. But also, we've got a vast number of medical growers on the island, and they're more into organic and probiotics than pesticides. What's interesting, though, is that in the 502 market, there's a list of pesticides that you can use, and there's a lot of petroleum products on there and things that you would not want to put into your body. And so while our 502 folks from Vashon are kind of leading in organics, the marijuana products that you can buy over town at 502 stores are not necessarily organic because there's a lot of legal pesticides that you would not want to take. And when you enjoy a cannabis product, you are absolutely getting everything that they put into the plant.
We need to get Barbara Kingsolver on this. Buy local.
Absolutely.
Well, if you do have a family farm that sets aside a plot for marijuana, is there any kind of, because I know you're also talking, in a lot of cases you were talking just now about LED lights, but you're talking about natural sunlight.
Yeah, outdoors is a great way to go.
Does that not introduce security issues?
Well, it certainly introduces security issues, but it's also not that hard to get around it. I mean, the LCB has got...
Deer fence?
Yeah, actually, it is a deer fence.
Ooh, deer on marijuana. That'd be a thing.
Well, what's one of the funny things is when I was testifying in front of the Liquor Control Board about marijuana agriculture, when I was done testifying, they allowed me to ask a question. And the question that I asked was, okay, so the security fences that we need are 8 foot. I said, I understand in the city that is to stop people from getting it. But on Vashon, an 8 foot fence is a deer fence. And everybody laughed. And then I said, can we intermingle our crops? If we're going to build this big deer fence for cannabis, can we also put our other deer intolerant crops in there? And they said, yeah, and they thought the idea was great. Now, that hasn't happened yet, but it shows that the door is open for us to commingle. We just have to choose to do it.
I was curious too, having read Botany of Desire, a lot of the organic vegetable farmers use other kinds of insect repellent plants around the perimeter and in among the plants. And has cannabis got any particular repellent properties of its own? Could it be beneficial to the other vegetables?
Well, as far as companion planting between cannabis and the other plants, I haven't read much about that. However, there are, ladybugs, praying mantises, things like that you can use to repel the bugs that are normally attracted to cannabis. And certainly with permaculture, you can use cannabis as shade plants for some of your leaf vegetables and things like that. So
true.
There is certainly a way to do that. And there are people on the island, we might have 4 502 growers on the island, and then we've got another 3 that are in the process. And we've probably got about, 100 medical growers on the island that distribute over town. But then as far as like the people who might have, 6 or 12 plants and it's just for their family themselves, there are hundreds and hundreds of those people. And I meet them all the time. And they've done some really ingenious gardens, companion planting, permaculture, usually organic, amazing rain catchment systems, because it's their hobby. And it may be a hobby that they don't necessarily tell a lot of people about because they don't want to be ostracized. But, Vashon has a long history with this plant. And that has not changed. And even with the changing of the home grow laws and the medical laws, it's still going to continue.
I'm still just trying to get around the notion of deer with the munchies.
Yeah, that's not a pretty picture.
How screwed up has this whole rollout been? I mean, any kind of sea change, as we saw with gay marriage, which really took a while. And then once things started rolling, it really got rolling. With legalization of marijuana, Washington and Colorado and now other states are coming on board, and they're going to go through their own processes. You would expect some issues and some things and some fumbles and some problems. But the difference between Washington and Colorado seems pretty stark in how
Yeah, I don't think many of them are going to copy our model.
Yeah, you're right about that. Actually, we are providing the examples, learn from our mistakes, which is unfortunate. And you're right, there are two sides to this answer. The first side of it is that we're the ones who are reinventing the wheel, right? No one had done it before us, so we kind of went into it in the dark. And so we should give the Liquor Control Board a lot of slack as far as having to do it first. However, even with that, they still screwed it up, and it's unfortunate. And there were a lot of different influential parties at play. There were a lot of folks, for example, when 5052 got passed, a lot of legislators said, we know this is not the right solution, but we've got to pass something, and we've run out of time, and so they just passed something. And that is the same way that the Liquor Control Board has handled this throughout. And normally in a political situation, I would be, it'll sort itself out over time. And this will too. But today,
A longer time.
And today is the time that the patients are the ones being caught in the middle. And that's what I'm not okay with.
So what can be done? I mean, you were talking about, I guess there's the R72 initiative that's being circulated for the November ballot.
So that is presently just coming out. As a matter of fact, I haven't received my petitions yet from the folks that are doing this. But essentially, it will bring us back to the point where medical is re-legalized. Because, we voters said we wanted medical marijuana 18 years ago. However, it was the Liquor Control Board who suddenly said, oh, now that it's recreational, we're going to get rid of what you wanted 18 years ago. We never voted to get rid of medical. We voted for legalization. What they implemented is not what we voted for. And so R72, we will be able to, folks will be able to sign that petition at upcoming VIMEA meetings. And as soon as I get my petitions, I'll circulate them here in town as well. And you can also find out more about that by emailing me at shango@vimea.org. But then also, while some of the medical marijuana sundown happens next month on July 25th, the second wave of it doesn't happen until July of next year. And so we'll actually have another legislative session before it's truly done. But they've already started wrapping it up now. They've already decreased the plant counts. They're already decreasing the dispensaries. And the law enforcement folks, they are revving up to start busting people because they're the number one funders of the I-502 folks, because by getting rid of marijuana enforcement and the civil forfeiture, that is a huge budget decrease for law enforcement
Because
agencies.
of the fines they used to collect.
Well, fines and taking your house and your car and your computer and then reselling it.
Oh, great. So now we've got that in the system.
I thought we were past all of this,
Yeah.
We're in a state where it's legal, and yet the law enforcement folks are ready to start kicking down doors again. Now, I want to give a caveat that the King County Sheriff here on our island is fantastic. So the King County Sheriff says that they're not going to be putting resources into, breaking up families and enforcing. Our local sheriff deputies are understanding, and their policy is generally, if there's no problem, there's no problem. So they're not going to come to your house to bust you for your plants because in their eyes it's legal. But if they come to your house for weapons violations and you have cannabis, well, then there's a problem. If they come to your house because of a domestic violence situation and you have cannabis, then there's a problem. So
like they won't stop you if you're not wearing your seatbelt, but if something else happens and you're not wearing your seatbelt, they'll bust you for that too.
That's a great example.
So the monthly meetings. Tell us about the monthly meetings. You say that they've been better attended as you've gone along.
Yeah, each meeting we've had more folks. At the beginning, we were mostly doing tutorials about the I-502 laws and regulations, and those were packed with people who wanted to get into 502. But then after the window for licenses closed, there wasn't really much to talk about in that, and so we moved to talk about topics like growing at home and cloning and probiotic growing at home and organic growing. And we bring in patient advocates and medical doctors. And we had our largest meeting ever last month with Dr. Ethan Russo, who is a world-famous cannabis researcher and neurologist who actually lives on Vashon. And he spoke, and it was the biggest meeting we ever had. We packed the Grange Hall. It was standing room only. Here, this is a great thing about the cannabis community. So a lot of people got there early to get seats because they knew that it was going to be a packed house. But there's patients here, people who have a hard time standing, and we packed the place. And so I noticed there were still patients coming in right as it was time to start. And I said, hey, folks, this is a patient-centered meeting. If you're young and healthy, if you give up your seat for a patient, that would be really great. Half the people stood up and allowed all these patients to come in and sit down, and then people were sitting on the floor and standing along the side. It was like, it was like a Berkeley sit-in or something. It was beautiful. There's not a lot of counterculture, maybe in counterculture, but there's not a lot of communities where so much concern is given for the weakest among us, and I think that's a really powerful thing. So the next VIMEA meeting that we have coming up is on June 17th, and I'm really happy to say that Dr. Ethan Russo will be coming back again. At the end of the last meeting, he smiled and he says, this was a really good time. I do have other topics to talk about. And,
Sounds like you need a bigger hall, though.
It would be great to have a bigger hall, but some of the places on the island don't want cannabis topics, and it's exceptionally convenient to have it right near the North End Ferry Dock because we get a slew of people who come over from Seattle because the folks that I'm able to book are very rare speakers. I mean, Ethan has just been speaking for pharmaceutical companies at very expensive conventions for 10, 15 years. The fact that he's speaking for free on Vashon is just unheard of. So he'll be back.
You should talk to the Chamber of Commerce. Get them involved. Get them in as one of their tourism opportunities.
We're a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and we work closely with Jim there.
We see your
ad in the Destination Vashon magazine from the Beachcomber.
Yeah, we've got a great colorful ad on page 48 of the Destination Vashon Tourist magazine, which is always great because there's a lot of businesses on the island that are cannabis positive, and we like to shine a positive light on them. And you can find out more about those businesses at our website, VIMEA, VIMEA.org. But to circle back around to Dr. Russo speaking again on June 17th, that's going to be at 7 o'clock at the Grange Hall, and that's free. And this time, Dr. Russo is going to be talking about all new things. He's going to be talking about endocannabinoid deficiency. We spoke in the first segment about our endocannabinoid system. And if we have a deficiency of cannabinoids, it can cause a whole slew of things, from irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, PTSD. There's a whole list. And so he's going to be explaining endocannabinoid deficiency and how to treat it, and that's free. And then if you missed the first time that Dr. Russo spoke here on the island, there were so many people off island who wanted to hear him. We went ahead and we booked a location in Tacoma. And so he will be repeating his special presentation on terpenes, which is the healing smells of the plant, and also whole plant medicine, why it's better to use the whole plant instead of just single constituents. And that's on June 11th down in Tacoma. You can find out information on those events also on the website at VIMEA, VIMEA.org, or our very active Facebook page, which is facebook.com/VIMEA.
Thank you. Thanks for coming by.
That was really interesting. Well, a lot of information we didn't have before.
Well, thanks for giving me an opportunity to get the word out.
Absolutely. Shango Los from the Vashon Island Marijuana Entrepreneurs Alliance, VIMEA. VIMEA.org is the website. Check it out. And thanks again, Shango, for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
It's 10:38 on the Morning Scramble. Here is the Burns Unit.